So why do people avoid financial decisions, even when those decisions matter? It's easy to assume the answer is education. Give people more information, explain the numbers more clearly, show them the benefits, and surely they will act. But money does not work like that. People delay, they overthink, they freeze. They say, I'll come back to it, and then life carries on. Not because they don't care, but because financial decisions often sit right in the middle of emotion, uncertainty, and behaviour. In this episode, I'm joined by Dr Phil Courtenay, whose work brings together psychology, behaviour, and financial advice. We talk about why people disengage from advice, why inaction can become so costly, and why advisors may need to think less about giving clients everything they could do and more about helping them take back the next step that they can actually act on. Hi Phil, thanks for joining me today.
Pleasure.
So let's start, Phil. So your work brings together psychology, behaviour, and financial advice, sort of the trifecta that we don't put together. How have you got to this place?
By accident is the short answer. Right. The slightly longer answer is my last kind of proper job. I was working in a wealth management business, heading up marketing and strategy, and I kind of fell into the psychology of financial decisions because it's kind of just an interesting area, right? Yeah. Why do people do the things they do? But probably more importantly in my mind, why don't they do the stuff they should be doing?
Yeah.
So you can imagine in the kind of marketing team, you're like, if we say to our clients, we will offer you a free financial health check, like,
amazing.
That is going to set their mind on fire. And clearly, no one cares.
Yeah.
Right. So, and if you said, why don't we tell clients that we can do these 101 things? We've identified that actually they came to us about this inheritance they've got, but we can show them they're missing out on tax optimization and they're not preparing for retirement properly, and we can do these 101 things. And they go away and they say, yeah, I'll have a think about it. What's going on?
Yeah.
So that was kind of the bit that interested me, right? Which is like the why. Like, why do we do silly things around money? Why don't we do the things we should around money? What's going on? And that kind of led me down this path of, behavioural science, psychology, just wanting to know more.
So what's the fascination behind, because people are weird about money, aren't they? So what's the fascination behind that? Because they do strange things that in any other walk of life you wouldn't be doing.
Yeah, so I think strange things is an interesting way to phrase it, right? Because on one hand, we do things that are genuinely irrational. And by that, I mean they don't align with what we actually care about. So we do things that don't ring true with our values, and we make decisions that actually don't benefit us or put us at a disadvantage. Right? That's kind of irrational. The other side of it, and this is where I spend some of my time speaking with advice businesses, is people do things that aren't economically advantageous, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're irrational. Right? It doesn't mean the decisions are stupid. It means that actually they prefer another facet of life. I was speaking to someone day before yesterday about this idea of compounding. We get obsessed in the profession around compounding, and it's this magical thing. But it's not just money that compounds, it's health and connections, all those sorts of things. And if somebody could invest in an area outside their portfolio now, that compounds. If they can spend the money on training or changing their career, that might compound. So there's this other part to what's seen as kind of irrational behaviour by the advice profession, which actually in my mind isn't necessarily irrational. We often optimise for the spreadsheet, right? And that's where there's a disconnect between what clients care about and what the regulator and the profession often care about, or at least put into practice, is that clients don't optimise for the spreadsheet. They optimise for the feelings, the life, their well-being, a sense of satisfaction, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So there's sort of two, kind of a slight nuance there, I guess, which really sort of fascinates me around what we consider being irrational behaviour for clients, if that makes sense.
It does make sense, yeah. And so what do you think some of the biggest reasons that people don't engage with financial advice? Because we know that, about 10% of the UK do, and the rest don't. So why is that?
Yeah, I mean, after you account for money, access, all of those kind of things, which is a fair portion, right? The advice, a lot of that is kind of is driven by the kind of systemic issues. From a behavioural point of view, the way I think about things is taking financial advice isn't a specific behaviour. You don't just suddenly wake up in the morning right, I'm going to take financial advice, right? And I I'm sure I upset lots of financial planners. And I stand up and speak on stage and say, look, no one wants to spend their time with you. They don't wake up in the morning being like, oh, do you know what? I fancy
Oh, I'd
doing
love
today.
that meeting. I can't wait.
Yeah. Scrap the night out of friends. I'm going to Google financial advisors. So the impact of that is it's actually a process, right? A behavioural process. And there are these different stages of, like any behaviour, we were talking about getting fit earlier, going to the gym, getting fit, eating healthy. There are all these stages you have to go through to be someone who goes to the gym, leads a healthy lifestyle. The same applies to financial advice. So if you think about the first stage that someone has to go through, they have to move from this state of kind of dormancy where they're not even thinking about advice, right? They might be unaware of their problems. They might be not saving enough for retirement, but they have no idea, right? So that's kind of number one. How do you address stage one, moving from a state of kind of dormancy to being sort of weighing up whether they should take advice? Once you've identified their problem, then they're in this kind of weighing part. They're like, should I take advice? What an anxious place to be, right? And if you think about a client who is the ideal client for an advisor, probably, financially comfortable, etc., or could be, but they've probably got loads of challenges, loads of financial challenges, loads of problems. Like, they've probably made a load of kind of shitty financial decisions in their past. They're the ideal client. Well, how does it feel for a client to be told that? Right?
Awful.
To have that highlighted, awful. Hence this kind of, this aversion we have to change, and why we stick with what we're doing and bury our heads in the sand. So you've got things like trust. I talk about the 3 E's. So emotions, effort, economics drive our behavior. So if you think about someone, they're the emotions. I'm going to feel like an idiot if my financial planner says, why have you done that with your money? Why have you made these poor decisions? Why have you tried to DIY invest and actually you've lost a load of money, or whatever it might look like? So you've got this barrier then when someone's weighing up to engage in advice to them being able to actually do it, to be willing to do it. So once they're willing, that's where this action gap comes in, this intention action gap. They can have their best intentions, right? They can be willing to take advice and think like, yeah, I've done it. And this is where, from a planner's point of view, people have seen this before, right? They're sitting in a meeting, discovery meeting, it's gone fantastically, and then people procrastinate.
Yeah.
And they're like, what is going on? They say, yeah, I'm going to engage. And then something happens, this intention action gap, something happens in the meantime, which they don't overcome, and they end up reverting to where they were. So you've got these kind of, as a behavior of engaging with financial advice, i.e. signing a client agreement and actually getting advice, there are a few different hurdles that in practice people have to overcome. And if we think about emotions, effort, economics, there are umpteen influences at every stage that we need to plan for, right? We need to design the client's experience, the prospect experience, to help people overcome those. It doesn't just happen by accident, unfortunately.
No, sadly not. And a lot of people talk about, people's behaviour is changing, right? I don't entirely sure I believe that. Is it behaviour that's changing, or is it the environment around us that is changing? What's driving things?
Well, in terms of nowadays, like
yes, exactly. How people are reacting to financial advice as opposed to how they did, let's say, 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah, so I tend to agree with you broadly there as well. The fundamental things that drive us, if you think about it, 2 directions, things that motivate us, move us forward, and things that hold us back, right? The kind of the friction or hurdles, whatever we think of those, they don't fundamentally change very quickly. It's taken humans a long time to kind of develop the wiring that we have to prompt the way that we often behave. So to your point, what does change are the options available to people, the solutions, things that probably better address what was already going on in people's minds in the first place. I mean, if we take AI, for example, AI is a new way that people can interact with their money, right? And a new way they can converse, and they can think about things differently. But AI isn't solving a new problem for people. It's solving the problem of anxiety that I mentioned. Yeah. I don't want to sit in front of someone. I feel a bit daunted if that person's going to put me on the spot. I'll speak to a non-judgmental chatbot, Claude or ChatGPT or whomever. So the anxiety has always been there. We just now have an alternative solution to address it. So the behavior is changing, but This is a great quote from Jeff Bezos around, it's important to think about what doesn't change in the world, in business. And for me, what doesn't change is people's psychology. Fundamentally, as humans, we're driven by many of the same things. So to your point, we need to design the right environment to appeal to those things rather than worry too much around what people are doing differently today. So what's the fundamental thing that we as a profession need to design for to be able to help people? That doesn't really change.
No, I agree with you. And I suppose, we have been in 2 years of very turbulent, political, social, economic landscape and environment, right? And it has taken quite a big effect on financial advice, I would say. Mm-hmm. What do those outside influences mean to people? How do people react to them when it comes to financial advice?
So like political stuff, you mean, and what's going on?
We don't mention it, but what's going on over here?
Yeah. So I mean, firstly, there's always stuff going on, right? Yeah. Particularly, I think the difference over the last, decades, say, is just that it feels like there's something
big.
going on every single day, right? That fact, and that can take its toll on people. Yesterday, was doom scrolling last night. And literally one post after next, you see Stephen Bartlett had a guest on his podcast talking about how you shouldn't invest. And, there's a big crash coming. And the next one was like, if you'd missed out on investing, here's So literally within a split second, you can see two completely different views. And that's everywhere. That level of noise, I'd say, is the thing that shifted. Actually, what's going on in the world, we're more attuned to it because there's so much noise. But the knock-on effect of that is advisors are moving from this role of helping bridge what we call like an information asymmetry gap. Right, that used to be the old way. Where I remember interviewing a client who said he moved his portfolio from a wealth manager in Scotland to one in London because they were closer, they were more on the pulse to what's going on. Right, doesn't make any sense nowadays, but it was this idea that they knew something that he couldn't get otherwise. They were closer to the information, market movements, all that kind of stuff. But we moved from that perception of information asymmetry, where the advisor planner is the expert and the clients need to have access to that, to now information funneling, right, or information filtering, where the planner and the advisors are saying, don't listen to all that stuff. You've got too much information now. My job to help you as a client is actually to help you filter that, to align it with what you really care about, because all this stuff is just noise if it doesn't impact your portfolio. If you're retiring in 30 years' time, we put the headphones on, just kind of ignore that. It's white noise. So that role has changed.
Yeah.
And I actually think, if I'm being brutally honest, that the best firms I work with get that, right, and they see that role. I wouldn't say everyone does. Mm-hmm. I think some people are still striving to be seen as like the competent ones who've got this little nugget of information that clients wouldn't otherwise have, and it's all about competence rather than actually the most valuable role, in my opinion, is being able to change people's behaviour, being able to stop them from making an awful decision, panicking and doing something awful, being able to align their values with their financial plan, all of that kind of stuff, which the best firms do very well. I think there are still pockets of the profession that don't do that well enough, I would say.
Yeah. And I think, I completely agree with you. And I think, we design for the best outcome for the client, right? But what you've spoken to me about before is designing for emotion. So, which I find fascinating. So explain what you mean by that, because people go, what are you talking about? We must design for the outcome, the best, but what do you mean?
So there's this concept, I guess, my philosophy, let's call it, which is you can't remove emotion from financial decisions. You just can't. Yeah. And we, as a business world, whatever, try and do that often. We're like, okay, we're going to try to stop people being emotional around money. And that makes kind of intuitive sense, right? Take the emotion away from it and you'll make just good spreadsheet decisions. In reality, we're never going to be able to remove that because we have evolved as emotional creatures, not creatures that deal with money in the best way, right? So then as an approach, it's really about designing for the emotion. And you can do that by setting the right environment for people. This idea that you have commitment devices in place to stop you from making emotionally driven decisions. So it's not about removing the emotion from the decision. It's accepting that you're going to feel emotional at some point when markets drop. Very few people in this world would not feel emotional if they had their life savings watching the red line go down. So we can't remove emotion. What we can do is put mechanisms in place. We can design the environment. We can design the experience. I'll give you another example of that. I worked with just finished a project with a firm where we looked at their client experience. And one of the gaps was right after someone becomes a client. And they say, oh, great, they've made a good decision. Which makes sense, right? Because from afar, a client has decided to take financial advice. They've overcome all those barriers that we've just been speaking about. In the client's mind, they are hugely vulnerable at that point. Because for the first time, maybe 10 years of this journey of thinking that I should probably do something with my money, they've finally taken action and they haven't seen much benefit. They signed the client's agreement, but haven't seen any direct benefit. They feel exposed. They put themselves out there. They still don't know whether to really trust this person that they've never worked with. And there's this huge emotional dip, right, where they have this sense of vulnerability. That's where a good client experience needs to jump on that and reinforce, you're making a great decision. Here are all the things we're going to do. Here's the team, and here's why you should trust the people that you're now going to be working with, etc. So that's an example. By understanding where those emotions sit in a financial journey, but particularly in a financial planning journey, then you design for them. You think, right, where are those emotional inflection points going to be, those emotional dips, those emotional highs, and what can we do to design an experience that accounts for them rather than kind of avoids them or ignores them, right?
Yeah. And it's interesting. So we've spoken about it before, but a lot of clients freeze. They panic, they have a meeting with an advisor and, the advisor goes in there, not by any fault of their own, but all guns blazers, because we sort of teach them to. We teach them to go in and see a client and basically unpick anything that they've done and gone, oh my gosh, you should be doing X, Y, and Z and this, this, and this. And the client goes, okay, yeah, great. As you said, emotional, doesn't really know what to do. I'll have a think about it. Now, in my world, when I say to somebody I'm having a think about it, I'm not doing it.
Yeah,
I'm absolutely not doing it. I just want to get you off the phone. So what's happening there in the client's mind, and how as advisors can we overcome that and change our behaviour to make sure that we're getting the best for the client without giving them that emotional vulnerability and instability and fear, really?
Yes. So look, let's go back to the three E's, right?
Okay.
Emotions, effort, economics.
Yeah.
Number one, emotions. We discussed anxiety. Anxiety is so much more prevalent amongst consumers, amongst people.
I thought you were going to say millennials. No, it's fine.
Everyone. And this is a really interesting point, actually, because I ran a study with 20 high and kind of very high net worth individuals, right, who don't have to worry about money, right? Who objectively, if financially comes to what one of the ladies in the interview said she could live to 120, spend something like £200,000 a year, and her kids would still be okay.
Right.
She's like, but it's just a worry, isn't it? And you're like, sorry, what? But how honest of her to say that as well. To be honest, but this sense of anxiety is pervasive amongst people, and a couple of studies, one in Australia, one in the Netherlands, looked at this, and around 2/3 of adults feel a moderate to high sense of anxiety around engaging with a financial professional.
Okay.
Right? So the majority of people felt that. So going back to your example there, well, that's going to be reinforced when someone says you've done some bad things, and I'm going to highlight them and I'm going to tell you all the bad stuff you've done, right?
Yeah.
So then the question becomes, so how are we meant to sort of, do we tiptoe around that? What do you do? Well, people need two things to have movement in a behavior, right? They need a heightened level of like arousal to do something. Their minds need to be thinking, this is urgent, right? It's important, it's urgent, I'm going to change. They can't have too much anxiety. The two things are related, but they are distinct. You remove the anxiety by saying, you've done all these bad things, or not in those words, but like, we're going to build on the stuff you've done. So it's all future looking. It's not about the past. It's not dwelling on the bad stuff you've done. Based on these things, there's loads we can do. And actually, we're in a great position to be able to do
so it's like positive reinforcement is what needs to happen.
Or the removal of negative reinforcement, right? Like the removal of reinforcing all the bad things and showing them the path to resolution. Right? That's the thing. If you think about this kind of tension that you need to take action like an elastic band, you can move one side of like, you really need to do something. We've got all these problems we've identified. If you move the other side too far away, i.e. the solution feels too distant, like something that they can't ever get out
Yeah.
of, the band breaks. You want enough tension for it to be able to, that band to be able to, fly across the room, but you don't want too much that it breaks. So you need to be able to show, look, actually, we've got all these problems, these things that we could be doing differently, but there's a solution that's within reach, and that's what working with me will look like. So pairing the solution at the point where we're saying to someone, you've got all these problems, here's what we'll do, and here's what, imagine that future. That's what you're selling. Right? Imagine a future where we overcome all the stuff. We're not dwelling on the stuff you've done badly.
Yeah.
We're painting a picture of what your ideal future would look like. I'm only on one of my three E's that I said I'd mentioned, but that's emotions, right? And that's probably, I start with that first because it's the biggest driver of behavior. If you think about effort, in that situation you mentioned, people get overwhelmed, right? So I thought I was coming to you, Helena, to talk to me about this little windfall I had, and whether I should invest it or pay off my mortgage or whatever.
You've got one key thing you want to talk to an advisor. You've got a thing, you've got a priority, haven't you, that you want to talk to them about?
I love that you use the word priority as well. There's no real such thing as priorities, right? It's like the priority is the thing. So I've got this priority in my mind, and then you've started saying, you don't have life protection and income protection for a key man risk and all that stuff.
I feel quite anxious right now.
And the spotlight's on me all of a sudden. Right, so there's the emotional element, but there's the effort element, and by effort there's physical effort and cognitive effort, mental effort.
Yeah.
From a cognitive effort point of view, I've now got half a dozen things to think about. I thought I was thinking about this one little problem over here, but now you've opened my eyes to it. Great, arguably, but I'm overwhelmed now. I've got too many decisions to make, too many choices, too many things to think about. So there's the mental effort that we ask someone to have to exert to engage with us is a barrier, right? The higher that effort, the higher the barrier. And then economics comes in. So people will often be anchored. One of the most frequent economic barriers I see is where people are anchored to the wrong thing. So your client comes in and they say, my investment platforms only charge me like 25 basis points, well, 0.25%. And you're suggesting 1% or like 1.2%. They're anchoring to a DIY version, or they're anchoring to their bank that doesn't charge anything, or they're anchoring to their mate down the pub's chat that they had. So we need to understand what's driving procrastination, some kind of barrier. Right? So economically, what's the thing they're anchoring your value to? And the best planners are the ones that help clients anchor to the thing they care about, anchor to what the future could look like, how they're going to feel afterwards. They need to rationalize, post-rationalize that it's a good decision to engage you, but they're not trying to have that conversation anchoring to investment returns or anything like that. They're anchoring to the thing that the client really cares about, that priority, that feeling that they have. Then they allow the client to post-rationalize it afterwards and make sure it feels like a good decision.
Yeah.
But that economic barrier, that perceived economic barrier, is huge, and it's often the driver of procrastination. But if we think about procrastination, somewhat the direction of travel would be someone carrying on and just doing the thing, right? They've already got out of bed to come and see you or get on Teams to talk to you, have that discovery meeting with you, spend their own time and effort doing that. So procrastination is really putting up a barrier to stop that momentum. So what are the things that you're actually inadvertently doing to stop the momentum a prospect has? That's the real question, I think, in my mind.
And I think that's the thing you've talked about, inaction is, the most expensive behavior in finance, right? And I think when you do overwhelm a client or they become anxious or whatever, our natural, fight, flight, sort of freeze situation is to just go, I don't want to do anything then.
Yeah.
And you just stop. So what's the advice to advisors that are in that situation, and they get it all the time. And I speak to my advisors and they're like, oh yeah, I thought it was a really good meeting. And they've sent back the LOAs. I haven't heard from them.
Right.
And you're like, well, what happened? Let's try and unpick what's gone on. And I wonder if it is around this overwhelming, because we do teach our advisors, and you do teach them to give a little bit of fear to the client, right? That is something that sales is a taught process, right? Yeah. So do we need to rethink that whole thing? Do we need to rethink sales, Phil? Is this what's happening right now?
Headline, stop press.
I know, exactly right.
Clickbait title. No.
Wonderful, thank God.
Great. Right. So solved. The sort of fear, uncertainty, doubt thing, right? It's there for a reason. That people need, I mentioned, anxiety and arousal. That sense of arousal comes from that kind of mismatch between where they want to be, where they feel they are. So You need to make sure that mismatch is there. And that's identifying the problem is very different from how the client feels and their responsibility for that problem and the fact they're going to work with this new partner to overcome the problem. You need to kind of do both things, right? There's not just, we maybe, to your point now, we maybe focus too much on instill fear and show people, you should really do something. If you think about it, they probably already know they should do something differently, right? If they've turned up on your doorstep, something's going on there in the first place. So sure, reinforce that, but back to my point earlier, help them through it, right? That's what they're now paying you for. They're not paying you to make them feel like an idiot, to show them the 101 problems. They're paying you to help solve them. So that's the path we need shown, this destination of, but I'm your trusted partner here. I'm the one who's going to, take you through this, and how you're feeling now that won't be the case because we're going to do X, Y, Z. It's that second bit that I think we don't spend enough time on.
Yeah. And I think it's really interesting now in the world of AI, people sort of say, and I just think it's ridiculous. People go, well, I won't need an advisor anymore. And I'm like, are you all right? Like, of course you'll need an advisor. And I think the advisor relationship will become more important because it is the trust and the relationship that you hold with your client. They can't have that with Claude or ChatGPT, other advisors, other things are available. But so with AI, we now know that before a client comes to see an advisor, they have absolutely put their issue into ChatGPT or any other AI platform and asked it all the questions, right? So we're now in a scenario where you've sort of got two clients, right? You've got your human client and you've got your chatbot, right? And you have to sort of work with both, which surely has got to be incredibly stressful because one is based more on emotion, as you said, and the other one is based purely on logic. How do we do this? Like, that's a tough gig.
First thing I would say is what you've just discussed, I completely agree with. And so many businesses are so far away from that way of thinking.
Okay.
I spoke at an event a couple of months ago now around AI, how it's changing people's financial behavior. And I said exactly that. Yeah, you've got this kind of two clients.
I may have got it from you, Phil. I don't know that.
The two clients, so how are you going to interact with them? And it was, leaders of wealth businesses, very like the largest wealth businesses, went around the table and not our clients. Like they trust us for that. So either you're not aware of it, or give it 6 months. If maybe that is the case. Maybe I've completely overlooked something. From the conversations I've had, everyone's doing it right. Give it 6 months and things will change. So firstly, acknowledge that is huge, right? Acknowledge the two client principle. Secondly, if we think about the purpose of AI, then so a client who's paying a financial planner a fair chunk of money to give them some kind of benefit, rationally, why would they ask someone else for that if they feel like they can get it elsewhere already? Well, one of the overlooked things that they're doing is, if I'm a client and my advisor is telling me something that's going to be fundamental to my next 30 years, right? What should I do with my money? Where should I invest it? Whatever that might look like. I want to feel dutiful to myself. And I can do that by feeling like I've done the due diligence on their advice. What that's not addressing then, so it's me fulfilling my responsibility to feel like I should know what I'm doing, right? And I should be scrutinizing my financial planner, right? I should be challenging them. If you think about the role of a planner, how many people listen to this as planners, financial advisors, and clients who might have done this with their planner? They will probably refer to their planner as like a bit of a sounding board or a coach, or they like to challenge them. Number of times where I've said to an advised client, like, have you challenged your advisor? And they say, yeah, all the time. We discuss why they're making that decision. I always challenge them and I ask them, what about this, and they explain it, and I get them to really I really scrutinize their recommendations. And then I say, and have you ever actually changed what you do on the basis of that conversation? No, my planner knows what they're talking about. So they waste their time, right? Seemingly having that conversation if they're never actually going to change their behavior. But what they're doing isn't a waste of time. What they're doing is fulfilling their own duty to themselves because this is an important decision, right? I should be challenging and scrutinizing and so forth. So I would argue that rather than some of the discussions I've seen of advisors saying, basically, we're better than AI, right? We're providing something that AI can never do what we do. We should lean into it and say to the client, if you want to challenge the stuff we do, and actually we find AI helps come armed, get your juices flowing before you meet us and come to the conversation thinking about, what you might want to ask us. And we're open to kind of you scrutinize our processes and our people and our competence. Do that. This is great. And actually we welcome that, because we don't want you to go away thinking that you haven't asked all the questions you should. And when we send your a suitability report, the client's sold on what the advice is. Like, say there's been an annual review meeting, we say we should probably do these things. We'll write it up in a suitability report, but that's been the clients had that discussion already. Yeah. The suitability report acts as this kind of reinforcement, a post rationalization, right? It allows the client to go, oh yeah, I know there's some substance to it, and so forth. AI now is going to be the first one when the client gets back, send the PDF over to Claude or whatever, anything that my planner's overlooked or anything I should be asking. It will say, yeah, have you asked about these things? They can go back. That working in tandem with an advisor is hugely powerful, because what you're doing there is helping a client feel good and comfortable and, importantly, in control and dutiful about their decisions. And I don't see many firms leaning into it at the moment. I see them, they're seeing AI, let's say broadly, as a competitor. And it will be for some segments of clients. Yeah. Right? But for your clients, it augments the experience for them. Actually, I really do think it's something we need to lean into and understand, where the role of the advisor can be supported and the client can be supported by using AI just to kind of plug the gaps that are inevitably going to exist if I'm putting a whole lot of trust in a person to tell me the right things to do about something that's really important to me, my financial future. AI can help me plug the gap of feeling comfortable, confident, and in control. Then great.
And I think that's what it is. I think it's making people feel comfortable with what they're doing. So it's like, 10 years ago, you go to the doctor and you go, so I think what's wrong with me is, because you've Googled it, right? And that's what people are doing. So that's what people are now doing before they go to an advisor. So they'll look at them, then they'll put into ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, and they'll say, well, this is my problem. What can you do about it? They'll then still come to the financial advisor, but those will be their questions. It will have told them what questions. So what I've got my advisors doing is going and using external chatbots to do the same thing, saying, I've got these clients, etc. What are they going to ask? Because I think you should be using it together. Like, it can help us. And I think people will just, for the first 6 months of a relationship, whatever we do with the client, they're going to go back and put it in. Like you said, the suitability report, they're going to go back and plug that in and see what it comes back with. Yep. But I don't think it will take away from the advice. But I think what it does do is give people a bit of peace, basically, that they've gone, well, I've double checked that now.
Exactly. I feel good.
I'm good.
About it.
I'm good with that. On that note, how do you think firms can use AI better to design process to help us work with clients? Because this is the way it's moving, right? This is where we are.
Yeah, so I'm going to frame this very negatively, what you just said, which is a sort of positive question, but
thanks.
Because lots of people are using AI already, right? Lots of firms, and what they're using it for, predominantly to become more efficient. My concern is that firms are going down the efficiency route and actually minimizing their value, inadvertently minimizing their value along the way. And by that, I mean, so take the example of a client who comes in to the annual review meeting or discovery meeting, gets this real high touch point in the experience, right? And that's where they're paying £10,000 a year. That's the main bit of where it feels like it's going, right? That point where they can sit in front of you for an hour. What happens more and more now is we say, we can transcribe that and send a summary within half an hour before the client even gets home. Like, how fantastic is that?
Yeah.
Does that feel valuable to the client? When they go, okay, so you're summarising what was discussed. I know, I was there. There's no layer of value on top of that. You summarise something. That's a very us-driven process, right? We say we summarise it and give it to the client. There's no additional value, and in fact, we're minimising the perceived value, because clients, we have this kind of effort bias, right? If something feels, that's why we say hard work is this valuable thing, right? It feels good. Hard-earned trust or your hard-earned whatever. Something being hard, something feeling effortful has value to us as humans, right? So you take the perceived effort away and you remove the value, right? You see this if you go on like Skyscanner or something, booking a holiday, it will say looking for flights, checking seats, whatever, like looking for your particular days. It will go through the motions of this sort of spinning circle and tell you what it's doing, and it might take 20 seconds. It probably doesn't need to take 20 seconds, but if it came up straight away, we're like, here you go, clicked search and it does it, then you think, oh, is it searched properly? Even though
I absolutely would think that.
Even though fundamentally we know that like computers are pretty quick things, right? It's, I'm not expecting it to sort of sit there and deliberate. But this perception of effort is important to us. Subliminally, subconsciously, we get a perception of effort. So going back to the financial planner then, we as a profession are at risk of becoming very efficient and less valuable. And what I would suggest is if a financial planning business, if you were to map out where are the real elements of value and what are the things that we don't want to make more efficient, what are the things we want to go the other way, actually you want to really double down on and say, it's going to take a day for this, because what we'll do is summarize the meeting, anything we've missed, we'll check, whatever that might look like. The budget comes out, right? Everyone raves about how quickly you can get a budget update out to clients. We got it half an hour after the budget was on. We used AI to transcribe the announcements, and then we summarize the themes. Everyone's doing it really quickly. I would argue, and this is just a silly example really, but I would argue if a firm wrote out to their clients and said, by the way, the budget's going to happen on the Wednesday, we're going to write to you on Friday because we're having the investment committee meeting on the Thursday and we're having a so-and-so reviewing it, and then we're going to tailor it to your individual circumstances. We're going to give you a handwritten, not handwritten, a personalised.
I'd like it handwritten as well. Handwritten, why ideally, not?
But personalised 3 bullet points if it applies to you, whatever.
Yeah.
That has huge value, right? But that's not following the norm of how can we get quicker and more effective, and the capability that AI has and where it should be used are potentially two very different things, and we shouldn't confuse one with the other.
That is fascinating, actually, because I had not thought of it in that frame, but you're completely right, because even as you're saying it, I'm thinking, well, that would make me feel that way. I'm sort of on board now. I'm going to tell the guys what we need to do around the budget. It's interesting because the relationship, is all about the financial advice, isn't it? And as we say, with AI coming in and all the rest of it, the technical side is gone. Really, a lot of it, the sort of nearly being chartered, all of that sort of stuff, the people that hang their hat on, like I'm the tax guy, or I know how to do all of this sort of stuff, that's going to be gone. So the whole basis of financial advice is going to have to be around relationships and building and being that trusted advisor, which is what's thrown around all the time. So what would you say is the best way for people to enhance that then?
I think I don't know how quickly the technical element will be gone. I do think it will become like a hygiene factor. Where you say, I assume you're technical. I assume this is technically good, sound advice. So on the relationship side then, assuming that is in place, and look, that's not an assumption as well. I think there are some very specialist areas. Yeah, exactly. But there are specialist areas. One thing people can do is change the perception of how technically good they are. And if you're very specific that for business owners exiting their business, some of the nuances that even if someone else knows them, but you talk about them more, then the perception of the technical side does change. But let's assume even kind of playing field on the technical side. My question would be, what do we mean by relationship? Because that can be, it can be kind of a lazy way, right, of us saying like they pay for the relationship. Like, what does that mean? Like, I need a relationship with, I want a relationship with my car mechanic because I don't know much about cars. Right? So I feel like I need that relationship to bridge me not knowing much and feel like I'm going to get taken for a ride, pun intended. Me feeling like someone's going to overcharge me for something that doesn't need doing. So I don't want a relationship with my car mechanic. I don't necessarily want, dare I say, a relationship with my financial advisor. I feel like I need a relationship to overcome these things. So that's the first, I think, port of call for me is, what do we mean by relationship, and why would someone need a relationship with you? Like, what's the thing that you're adding? And there are some very clear benefits of financial planning that I genuinely think will, I wouldn't say always remain, but will be less susceptible to being AI'd, right? And if you think about, okay, so where does that relationship have most impact? Well, if I was sitting, if financial planner was sitting with me and talking about my kids, and maybe my wife and I disagreed on our financial plan and how much my kids might inherit in the future or whatever, well, that's very hard for that to be teased out through AI, right? So there are family dynamics that there's huge value of that relationship. Like the best instance of what a relationship looks like is where there are multiple people involved, where there are areas where you can learn from someone's experience. If I said to you, other clients that we've got in your position tend to spend X amount. They tend to face these barriers when they retire, and actually they start to feel like they don't have the permission to spend the money. All of that kind of stuff that I can approach you about, that's a relationship. It's applied to a very specific area. And there are lots of different examples of that, right? But I think the point there is getting specific around what we mean by relationship. And how we can demonstrate to the clients the value of that relationship, because just having someone they can pick up the phone to, I don't think is enough anymore. Mm-hmm. They can pick up the phone, they can go on their Claude, whatever, in the same kind of way. So that access isn't a relationship. Bouncing ideas off, I would argue, isn't a relationship. It's getting into the nitty gritty of like the best version of you as a financial planner. What does a relationship actually entail? What are the things you do? What are those uncomfortable conversations that you're having that no one else could? Define relationship and double down on it. Really bake that into your process.
Yeah. And I think that's what we need to look at moving forward with new advisors coming on board, that there is a different way of doing this. You know, it used to be, you know, the old sales guys and selling products, etc. You know, it has changed considerably. Mm-hmm. And I think it's going to change even more in the next couple of years. And we really have to adapt our behaviour to our clients' behaviour. Mm-hmm. But really, because otherwise they will end up doing things themselves, DIYing, all the rest of it. Now, we know that we end up with people coming back when they've done it DIY and then go, oh, I've made a mistake and I've done this. But I think that's really important. One of the things that we've talked about, slight segue here, mm-hmm. that we've talked about is, and it's a little bit around having the team around you and stuff, is getting new clients and referrals. And how do we, and it bases off the relationship, right? So referrals are king when it comes to getting new clients, right? Sure. People aren't tremendously good at it, or they're nervous around doing it. This is when the advisor becomes nervous, isn't it? They don't want to ask someone, even though they've done a good job. How do we get over that? What should advisors be doing, and what should they be looking for?
They should be doing loads of things different. As you know, did some work for Foster Denovo around this topic. Good. Went down very well. Right?
It went down brilliantly, Phil. Excellent work.
If we think, if I was to say, like, what really moves the dial when it comes to referrals, and to your point there, it's one of those, like, it's a paradox, right? Because you go, it makes life so easy when a client refers you to someone else, and the conversion rates are higher. Those clients tend to stay longer, and those clients tend to refer to more people, mm-hmm. right? So it's this kind of perpetual flywheel compounding effect of referrals. And one of your advisors, I think, said he built a business. Basically, all of his clients now refer.
Yep.
100% of new business comes from referral. Like, what a place to be, right? But firms don't invest anywhere near as much in design themselves to be referable as they would in sponsorships or social media or whatever it might be, digital marketing. So, firstly, like, treat it properly. Treat it as the most important marketing channel that it is.
Because it isn't treated that way.
It's not treated that way.
It's a tag on at the end of something. Oh, have you asked for a referral? Oh, I forgot. Or I haven't done it. Or, yeah, I sort of asked them if they know, do you know anyone?
Do you know anyone? And we go, okay, what can we do to address that? Like, and someone goes, I've got a bright idea. We'll sit all the planners and advisors down and we'll say, what if? Let's ask for more referrals. And let's add it to the bottom of an agenda as like a point, ask for referrals. And you go, pat ourselves in the back, like, isn't that a great idea? No one's ever thought of that before. Because the reality of referrals is it's the sweet spot of, like, psychology, right? How much risk is there for you to refer a family member, a friend, about money and all the stuff we've already spoken about, this highly anxious area of life? and say, put your trust in these people. I will ask you to put your trust in me, to put my trust in
because
them.
then it's on me as a
It's
person.
on me.
I've referred like that. So you're going to look at me and go, that's your fault.
Exactly. So,
Yeah.
so huge social risk
Yeah.
element to that, right? And if you think about this behavior process that I mentioned before, some people have never been triggered to think about referrals. They're in a state of dormancy, right? That you're not on their mind when they're around a dinner table chatting about life. It's not like, oh, I should talk about my financial plan. It just doesn't crop up. They don't know the triggers to look for. If someone says, if you were a fly on the wall and you could see a conversation, any conversation over dinner, a glass of wine, and someone goes, oh yeah, I'm thinking about selling my business. Someone else goes, oh yeah, great, I was thinking about doing that, but I've just made partner at my law firm and whatever. And someone else, you'd be screaming like as a fly on the wall, but that they should take advice. They should take advice. Clients aren't thinking about that because they're in a dormant state. They're not thinking about you. So they don't know the triggers to look for. They don't know when to mention you. So it's a very lazy question. Say, do you know anyone that might benefit? You receive benefit from our services and hopefully real value from what we do. If you can think of anyone else who might benefit, like that's lazy because it puts the pressure on the client to think I'm now in charge of having to do your.
And it's a huge amount of effort for the
huge amount of
client,
cognitive
right?
effort,
And
right?
you're doing nothing.
So you say to them, right, can you do my sales job for me?
Yeah.
So in reality, they need to be well versed on what the triggers are. They need specificity around that. If I said to you, Helena, do you know anyone that's healthy? Right? Sure, you probably be able to
Yes,
think
I hope so.
But they wouldn't necessarily come to mind that easily. If I said to you, do you know anyone that's run a marathon? That person would probably come to mind far more quickly, right? Even though probably the person who's run a marathon fits within that Venn kind of diagram circle, so they're much smaller, but the specificity makes a difference there.
Yeah.
Because it's a thing. If I said to you, do you know anyone who's sold a business, who's a business owner, who's a law firm partner, who's a barrister, who's just had kids, life protection, all those things we were talking about earlier, that's far easier than do you know anyone that might benefit from actual advice? Like, don't put the pressure on me. So that's one of the areas we spend a lot of time thinking about how we can get that ask right, though. And there are dozens of different ways you can generate referrals. The pinnacle that I try and get firms towards is where people are talking about you and you're not having any involvement. Right? They're talking about you when you're not in the room.
Yeah.
Because they get it. They know how to refer you. They know that it's low risk. They know the process to go through. They know the types of people. They know the triggers to look for. They know that they're. If you imagine you were training a new business development person in your organization, what skills, what knowledge would you need to equip them with? Now think about your 1,000, 20,000 clients are potentially business developers for you. How would you train them in a similar way? What tools, capabilities, skills, knowledge would you want to give them to enable them to do that? And what barriers can you help them overcome? Because if they've got any social risk involved, they think, I think this is a good decision, but I'm not quite sure. They just won't do it. Right.
Yeah.
So like I say, it's a really high risk area. There's lots of things that we need to do to equip clients to be able to refer us better, because satisfaction isn't enough. Right? That's a hygiene factor. They won't refer you if they're dissatisfied, but being satisfied doesn't generate referrals. The best businesses are the ones who design themselves to be referable, not just satisfy clients, make them happy. That's table stakes. Right?
Yeah. I think it's very interesting because this is where the advisor gets anxious. So I can't tell you, we've got 90 odd advisors in the business. I can't tell you how many sort of go, I didn't really want to ask.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about asking. I had one guy that came up to me and I just thought this was absolutely bonkers. And I said, oh, did you ask for referrals? And he said, no, I thought I'd wait a year. I said, what, for the markets to dip? Like, why wouldn't you ask them when you've just done a good job and they're really happy with them? And he was like, oh, I just sort of wanted to see how it went. And I was like, well, I couldn't even understand that. But it's the only time, well, not the only time, but that advisors are uncertain of themselves. They don't like doing it. So how do we, final question, I promise, but how do we get them over that hump?
So there's an assumption in that advisor's mind, I suspect, which is I'm asking for a favour. It feels like I'm asking for a favour. And if you look at three motivational forces behind referrals, there is kind of reciprocity, which is that, like, I've delivered a good service to you. Can you now help me? Right? Like we
Quid pro quo.
Yeah, we reciprocate where someone's received some kind of benefit. Fine. That is one of the least powerful motivators of referrals.
Okay.
Reciprocity. Coming in at number 1 or 2 is self-affirmation, which is where if I've just bought, and this isn't true, otherwise I sound like a right arrogant so-and-so. Imagine I've just bought like a top-of-the-range Porsche or whatever. Well, it might be quite good if you said, "Oh, where did you get that? Have you got a contact?" And I say, "Oh, why don't I'll take you down to the showroom and I'll refer you to Porsche." That feels quite good because actually I kind of want to show off that I've got my brand new Porsche, right?
Yeah.
I want to show you my status, all that kind of stuff. When someone's engaged a financial advisor, there's some self-affirmation. They feel good about themselves because they're doing something good around their money. They've got their shit together, right? They're sorted. So there's that element to them that actually people want to feel good about themselves to others. That's a stronger motivator than reciprocity when it comes to referrals. If we were to target the one thing, though, that we should really focus on...
This is what I've been waiting for, Phil.
It would be... This is where you cut the podcast.
Yeah.
It would be pro-social behaviour.
Okay.
And pro-social behaviour is we want to help other people, right? If you're referring
Well, it does make you feel good, though, doesn't it?
That's the self-affirmation bit, right? The make you feel good is make you feel good about yourself. And the pro-social is I want to help the other person. I'll give you an example. If you look at if you buy something from an e-commerce store and it says refer someone and you'll get £10 cash back or 50% off or whatever, that's far less effective than if they make you an offer that the person you're referring to also gets some kind of financial benefit.
Okay.
Because that pro-social motivation outweighs me getting benefit for myself, that actually I care about the benefit you're getting. So in terms of what's the advisor doing, sitting there thinking then, they're thinking about reciprocity. They're thinking about, I don't really want to, I know I should be doing it, right? I don't really want to ask a favour, particularly as they've just started working with, I can't ask for favours already. It's a mindset shift to go, okay, what am I giving to the client? And that's where all of these things marry together, right? Specificity, the other, making it easy for people and so forth. The ask shouldn't be, I'm trying to grow my bit, like, oh God, this makes my stomach churn a little bit. I'm trying to grow my business. We grow through referrals. Can you help?
Yeah, I felt a little bit sick then.
Yeah, thank you. But if you say, we've got this thing, whatever it might be for someone about to enter retirement or for someone selling their business or for someone who's just made partner or for someone who's just had kids, whatever, this valuable thing, it's very low risk, right? So we're running this webinar, for example. That would be a referral, like a very low touch, low engagement referral. But that's a stepping stone, right? To that, you might say, if you know anyone, we're offering like a guest place to our clients to bring someone else to this seminar or whatever. There are these little incremental steps that you can take towards a referral. There's a big difference between that, something that's really valuable for the person that's going to receive it, and you're talking about the value they're going to get and why, and it's really clear, to saying, do you know anyone you can recommend me to? Like hugely high social risk. So that's kind of an example, but the principle to that is we need to plan. Like what are the reasons someone who's satisfied isn't going to refer you? It's the question in my mind. And what's the reason you as a planner aren't willing to ask? How do we unpick that? And we need to, you design for those things, right? You design the right conversation, you design those moments. And you can also design, this is the last question, so I won't go down this rabbit hole, but there's so much emphasis on the ask around referrals as if that's the thing that's gonna drive people. But if you're going to be referable when you're not in the room and you're not asking, how do you equip a client to be able just to talk about you, just be your best salesperson without you having to ask, right? That's where you get to the real kind of sweet spot of being referable and designing an experience to be referable. Maybe that's one for another day.
Well, listen, I feel like I want everyone to listen to that and start making a whole marketing strategy about referrals. But that has been amazing. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thank you. Thanks for having me.